necessarily have a next step ahead of you. That's something that we can take a real leadership attitude towards. Yeah, right back here.
I'm actually a teacher at a country school in West.
Which one?
The Alpha Charter.
Yep.
We're kind of stand under the education tree in the basket because those that fall out. Sometimes after you meet the branch. But I mean, a lot of what I'm hearing is sort of yes, all fine and good, but it seems to be most of my kids aren't going to or if they do, it might be going to college. So it's STEM, less important than trades. You know, something like Coles, get them into there's no wood shop, there's no metal shop. They have an excellent FFA and a film and video program. More power to them. But things like trades, college it seems like increasingly, we talk about it, it's good, but I see a whole lot of people going $50,000, $100,000 in debt and not getting stressed out. So college is not the answer. It's a step, but instead of relying on more like basically vocational stuff like that.
Yeah, I don't know if you heard the second part of my education answer.
I did about the FFA and stuff.
No, about apprenticeship programs and trades. I think it's all part of the same thing. So your question is, for folks that maybe didn't hear it, what can we do to push more people in trades? This is a huge issue. 84% of the adults in our district don't have a college degree. 84%. We should be pushing more folks to a college. That's great, but that's not going to work for everybody, right? We can do a lot more. So there are programs that are already being successful, right? What I want to do is I want to take those programs to make sure everybody has an opportunity. I can't tell you how frustrating it is for me to go to an employer, for me to go to Foster Farms. I sat down with the folks at Foster Farms a little while ago, and they say, it's really hard for us to find, skilled people without a college degree to do accounting. And then I go to some of our high schools, and the high school kids graduate, and they say, well, I can't get a job here. I got to go to Oakland or Berkeley to get something. And I say, this doesn't make any sense. Why don't we find a way to put these two things together where Foster Farms, Gallo already has a program that does some great stuff with this, and we go directly into our school systems and we make a promise to our kids, and we say if you graduate from this program, you don't have to take a job. You could go to a 4-year school if you want to, but you have a guarantee at a good living wage job that is going to, whether it's driving a forklift in a manufacturing environment, whether that's installing solar panels, whether or not that's doing accounting that doesn't require a college degree. There's a lot of things that we could be doing for those kids, and we can make a real promise to them. We can say there will be a job here at the end if you get X amount of GPA and so forth. We just need to be able to have the infrastructure to build those sorts of programs because we need it right here.
To build on the education, what is your position on privatization, especially with our current Secretary of Education?
Yeah, it's a good question. For folks that didn't hear it, what is my position on privatization or voucher programs, as maybe some folks want to think about it? I think they're terrible, right? I mean, the best example of this is Secretary Betsy DeVos's actual example, which happened in the state of Michigan. So, folks who didn't follow it very closely, the state of Michigan used to have pretty good educational outcomes, 25th in the country in education and math and science, and then Betsy DeVos spent an enormous amount of money trying to privatize their entire system, and they did. They moved towards for-profit schools with absolutely no restrictions. And what happened? You saw a handful of folks get really rich, and then you saw a lot of the educational outcomes absolutely plummet. Right now, today, Michigan is in the 40s of states in terms of educational outcomes. And I think that's very clearly because they privatized a lot of their school systems. I think it's probably one of the worst things that we could do to our school system is try to take money away and put it into for-profit systems where the interests of the student aren't first and foremost, right? I mean, if you're creating a for-profit school and all you want to do is make a lot of money, it's not gonna work. We also see this already happening in higher education, where a lot of the higher education institutions, kind of the University of Phoenix, they spend a ton of money on advertising. They get a lot of people, often folks coming back on the GI Bill, and they don't actually create good educational outcomes. I don't think for-profit schools have a good record for it, and I don't think we should allow them in any way. Yeah, more questions, and I'll mingle around, but I want to make sure that folks also get a chance to go and get some coffee.
Someone else wants to?
No,
okay.
Yes, sir.
This is kind of a broad question, but it's something that is on my mind a lot. And that's this perpetuation of fake news. it isn't so much anymore that you can just simply disagree with the Democrat or Republican, but if you don't agree with it, it has to be fake. And if they're not your fellow D or R, you have to demonize them to a point that their patriotism is called into question, their value as a citizen is called into question. What specifically will you do as one of the 435 congressmen to elevate the maturity and the civility of dialogue and to actually get a consensus to achieve something?
Yeah, question for folks in here. What are we going to do about fake news, alternative facts, and the facts, this really hurts us because if we can't agree on a common set of facts, then we can't lead to a consensus of what we actually need to do to fix it. If one person thinks that a problem is that crime is skyrocketing and another person thinks that crime isn't, well then you're not going to lead to the same sort of policy outcome if you don't agree on what is actually happening, which you can see. This is a really complicated problem with a lot of stuff going on. I'll give you one thing that I really think we can do, which is a lot of this fake news is being propagated online through Twitter and Facebook and our institutions like that. That's why we saw Mark Zuckerberg come into DC and do a bunch of panels. The attitude of these platforms has been that they don't have any responsibility for what actually occurs on them. Whatever anybody wants to post, if somebody else wants to like it, if somebody else wants to support it, that's fine. They've done a little bit to curb hate speech. They've done a little bit to kind of curb some of the most egregious things, but they need to do a lot more. I think these companies need to reimagine themselves as media companies as opposed to platforms which have no responsibility, and we need to regulate them. We need to say, if there is a story that is not true, that is going on Facebook, not only can you hold the underlying, media company that posted that story or that created that story responsible, you can hold Facebook responsible for not actually taking it out. There's one of the things I want to do is make sure that there's a positive, a checkbox for institutions that actually hold high news standards, right? So right now, there's so many different news outlets that you see on Facebook or Twitter, you don't know what to trust. There should be a trust symbol that we should have, and we should be holding these platforms accountable for the news that they actually operate. If we don't, then everybody's going to continue to fractionalize their news intake, and we won't actually be able to agree on a common set of standards. Yeah?
That kind of bouncing off of that is that I don't know if there is currently a journalism department, but when I was there, it was completely cut out along with a lot of other important critical thinking classes. And so with regard to fake news, where does that come in if the money follows STEM and you have no journalism department because they say, well, they're going to take their jobs out of the area, and so we're left. Where do they pick up those skill sets for critical thinking?
Yeah, I think what we've seen happen now is there's an upshot in citizen journalists, right? The rise of blogs, the rise of Facebook. A lot of this stuff is being written by individuals who don't necessarily have a lot of journalistic training. That's just the way it is. I think we can accommodate that. We can recognize it, but we still need to make sure it holds higher standards of truth and accountability. And the way we do that is we're not going to be able to say, well, Samantha wrote something that's a lie, Samantha should be held accountable. We have to say, Facebook, you are not allowed to post things by people that don't satisfy, you're not allowed to support things and to actually propagate things that don't hold basic standards of journalistic integrity and accountability, right? That's we have to hold the big guys responsible, not just the little guys. Because the fact is while we should be making sure people go to journalism school, well, we should make sure that the free press continues to exist. There's been a dispersion of viewpoints, right? There's now so many different people. Anybody with a Twitter account can post whatever they want. We saw that with Donald Trump. Continues to post whatever he wants. What we should do is we should actually make sure that Twitter and Facebook hold those people accountable instead of just the individuals, because that's like whack-a-mole. We're never going to be able to get to the truth with that. Yeah, one question back here.
Yeah, well, don't you think that's a generational issue? Like, with the power of social media, just like everybody with a cell phone can just become a journalist. Pretty much, they can think they have become a journalist. And I think that's a generational issue. I wouldn't put blame on the social media platform itself for that problem. I would put it more on like everyone in this generation, because of social media, thinks they just become entitled to their own. Like, everyone is entitled to their own opinion, but social media has put it out there to where it's like, if you have an entitled opinion that other people of your generation agree with, it could just blow up, and then like you said, there's a lot of fake news that goes on social media. I would blame the small person rather than the social media platform, because at the end of the day, the social media platform is a business, and people giving their opinions, and those opinions blowing up is getting them more traffic and more people on their accounts. Like, you made a great point, but I would still put the blame on the people writing those types of articles.
Let me give you one example. Let me give you one real concrete example. The number one fake news story of 2016 was the Pope endorsing Donald Trump. Right? It wasn't true. The Pope did not endorse Donald Trump, but it was written by a small kind of fake news Breitbart-like site, and then it was posted on Facebook, and it went viral. Tons of people were sharing it, and it was really big news. What do I think we should do about that? Well, currently our status is we go to that news publisher and we can, and we can actually tell those people that that what they did was wrong and it didn't hold accountability standards and that. What I am suggesting is we go the extra mile. We also say Facebook, look, a huge percentage of people on your platform were seeing this news. You are not held blameless, right? Obviously, there should be some, period of time. It's hard. It is like whack-a-mole, making sure that you counter every single piece of mistruth. But if there is a piece of fake news, like the Pope endorsing Donald Trump, which is not true, Facebook should not be held blameless. They should actually be held to account for lies that are going on their platform that millions of people are seeing because of Facebook, right? And so we have to be able to, walk and chew gum at the same time.
I just think that's the power of social media in general.
It's the power.
You can put anything on social media and it can become a giant controversial topic, whether it's real or not.
Yes.
Social media is just such a powerful thing in this generation that
it is an amplifier.
Yeah.
And what we need to do is we need to make sure that it's not amplifying the bad stuff.
It's being utilized in a good way, is what you're saying.
Like the kids in Florida with mad social skills who have decided they're going to change the world, and they might do that.
And by the way,
They
some of
know
those
how to do
kids,
that.
some of the kids that are building off of that are right here in our own community. I mean, the March for Our Lives protest in Sherlock, the largest political protest in Sherlock City history, right? Because of the power of social media, because these 16-year-old kids saw what happened in Parkland, they saw what happened. That should give us some hope and faith for an optimism for what's going on. Yeah, Roland.
I don't argue with anything that's been said about social media, but the history, I follow the news pretty well. The history of the meanness in the news, the person to blame is Murdoch, the guy who owns Fox News. He really injected, because he found that this heightened type of discourse was good for his bottom line. This guy is going to continue to do that as long as he's alive. Fortunately, hopefully, he's 84, and we won't have to deal with him much longer, because I think his sons are a little bit more civilized.
Yeah, and ultimately what we can do is we can set a counterexample that I think is really powerful. All right, one more question, maybe one more two, and then I'll be around. Catch questions. Yeah, one then two.
Okay, well,
You're number one.
I'm speaking as somebody who went to journalism school, have a degree in journalism, actually worked for a short time with Modesto PD, saw the change happen. I went to Fresno State, saw the change happen in journalism back along a long time ago. And the example was I was sent out to get something on the Fresno State election result. And I was told by my editors to get this story. I said, I cannot do that because I need to see what's going on and then write the story from all, because we were taught at that time to be objective and to be in depth. I wrote the story, granted it's just a college election, but turned it in and they put in a story that they wrote starting to happen in journalism. And I think one of the things that this blame kind of thing is a problem. I think what we individual, because the media, social media is out there, because the internet is out there, we have access to everything and anything. And we, as individuals, have to take responsibility for how we look at that, think about it, and do something about it. Again, as Lynn pointed out, the schools are not giving enough critical thinking opportunities. And it's now incumbent upon, before when we were growing up, you were in lockstep, there was a uniform set of mores, values, whatever, and pretty much everybody kind of kept in line. Now we now have the freedom, which is good, to think and do anything we want. But we don't, it's like when they took Fire High School and they made it an open school and the kids went in and took their, every morning they made their own schedule and but it failed. Of course it failed. They had 8 years of K through 8 where they were in classes where the teacher told them what to do and they sat in the rows, okay? And then they were expected to just be thrown in and make decisions like a college student about just their daily schedule.
Yeah, no,
So that's where I'm saying, as a society, we're in a real flux of not taking responsibility as individuals.
and that's one of the reasons why it's exciting to see so many people coming here today, taking a little bit of responsibility and getting involved. Yeah.
To pivot, what is your position on, well, two parts, the prison and some of our criminal, our approach to our incarceration, our huge incarceration population, and also gun control?
Yeah. Good place to end on, because they're two really important issues. Let's talk about gun control real quick. We have seen a real movement over the last couple months that I think is unbelievably exciting around finally trying to confront this issue and trying to acknowledge that thoughts and prayers are no longer enough. We have all been disgusted at the number of times we have to wake up in the morning, see the headlines of the news, and think, oh my gosh, how could this have happened again? There's a lot we can do about it. Let's first talk about Jeff Benham, what he's done, which is not just nothing, but actually worse than nothing. He's rolled back a lot of gun control measures, right? He's pushing for concealed carry reciprocity, which basically gives us the gun control laws of the state of Nevada right next door. And he's taken $60,000 from the NRA, so it kind of comes full loop into what we're talking about when we're talking about money in politics. He's taken tens of thousands of dollars from them. No surprise where he's voted. What I want to do, we already have a set of successful gun laws that already exist in California. We have AR-15s are not allowed here. You can't buy a weapon of war in the state of California. We have 10-day waiting periods, which are enormously important for the silent epidemic of gun suicides. 20,000 people a year die in gun suicides, which is more than actually die in some of these mass atrocities. And we have universal background checks. All three of those things we already have here in California, and no surprise, they work. They have cut down gun deaths by over 60% over the last 25 years that we've had those protections in place. What I want to do is make sure that we take what already exists in California and make sure it exists in all the rest of the country, right? So, in Nevada and in Parkland, Florida, and all these other states where they don't have nearly the same protections, we make that the law of the land everywhere else. And we can do that, and I can still stand in front of an NRA supporter here in this district and say, look, I want everybody else to be subject to the same laws that you are already living by right here in our district. Because we know they work, we want to make sure that they're happening everywhere else. That's what we need. So thank you guys all so much for coming. Yes, well, before I finish that, thank you. What were you going to say?
About things that people can do.
Well, I was going to say that.
And also, he wants to record people who support you.
Super.
Yeah.
So here's what I would say. Thank you guys so much. You've already taken a big first step by actually showing up on a Saturday where there's other things to do, where there's delicious tacos a couple blocks away at the Modesto Taco Festival. I highly recommend it. I really appreciate it. Ultimately, the only way that we make progress on any of these things, if I were to characterize what we talked about today, there's really two sets of things. It was what can we do about money and politics, and what can we actually do to solve some of our core democratic institutions? What can we do to fix what we're all frustrated about? And guess what? This is not just a theoretical discussion. We can all do something. We can get involved. There is an election in 32 days, and we can make that voice known. We all have a vote, and I hope you all will vote on June 5th. Maybe not, the kids aren't 18, but everybody that can vote should vote. But there is so much more you can do. We have one volunteer who has knocked on nearly 1,000 doors already. The entire city of Newman it has knocked on at least one time. There's a lot that can be done. We need your help. We need you telling your friends, coming to our events or our campuses, helping us knock on doors. And if you have money, give us money. We need that too. But more than anything, we just need your support and your power to make sure that we can get that message out there. Because once we do, we will win. So thank you guys so much. If you guys want to talk, I think Richard is going to, anybody who has a personal story to tell or something that they want to say, I think it's actually really powerful to record these things. What we do with them is then we can put them on Facebook. And instead of me saying, this is what I believe, this is why I think we need universal health care, it's somebody else's story. This is why I am supporting Josh, because I think this is what matters on Medicare for all, this is what matters in immigration reform. That is much more powerful than me just saying it myself. It's ultimately got to be a campaign from the ground up, and that's what we're trying to do. So with that, thank you guys so much. Another round of applause for Jim and Suzanne and all of you. Really appreciate it. If you had any questions you were too shy to ask, come up and answer and ask them, and I'll be around for a while. Thank you. Thank you guys for coming. Any questions?
I had just one more question.
Yeah, what is it?
Where do you think Jeff Denham has failed us the most as a representative?
I think Jeff Denham has voted with his political party every single vote. He has a 98% voting record with his political party. That means he doesn't vote in the interest of this district. That's the single biggest problem. We see it on healthcare reform, we see it on immigration reform, we see it on the tax cut. None of those three votes in the last year and a half were in any way representative of what this district needs. So my biggest problem is that he votes with his party instead of with us. That's what I would do.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no worries. What do you think? Enjoy it? Good, good. Well, if you're interested, we're looking for more interns. Look great on a college application. All right, take care.
Take this home and wear it. Wear it in a country where you can have that freedom. Because they had just had a military coup. And I think we've come on some pretty rough times. So when I heard all the candidates, I heard them all again. And then it's a big decision, so I heard them all again. And I decided that I'd get behind Josh harder, and I'd really like to thank him for being with us today.
Yeah, thank you so much. When we get off this, it makes me feel like I'm leading a circus and have some horses or something. Thank you guys so much for being here. Thanks to our hosts for opening up their wonderful home. There's a lot going on, even a lot in the last 24 hours in Washington. So I hear a lot of things, and we can't necessarily cover everything, but I felt like it would be most helpful for me to just give an overview of myself. Some folks have heard it a lot. An overview about the issues that I'm hearing in the campaign, and then we can have just kind of an open discussion after I kind of kick it off. I actually wanted to thank all of you because at these sorts of things, I actually get a lot. I hope you learn a little bit more about me, but I also wanted to thank you because ultimately the job of a representative is listening. And it's being representative of the interests of your constituents. And that's what I'm trying to come and do, and so I really appreciate just to hear your unbridled thoughts and concerns and all the rest. First, a little bit about me. This is an area that I know pretty well. I'm a fifth-generation resident. My great-grandfather came out on a wagon train in 1850, came 2,000 miles in search of gold, and then stopped 50 miles short to become a peach farmer in Manteca. Figure. But I actually grew up in Turlock, went through the school system. My dad is, who's optometrist is he? I lost. Somebody's optometrist. You're optometrist. He's a Harder Optometry on Orangeburg, not too far away from here. I graduated from Modesto High. I've got a couple Panthers right here. Actually, a couple more Panthers. A lot of Panthers. Who all went to Modesto High? Or taught at Modesto High? A lot of folks. A lot of folks. A lot of good people. And I got a scholarship from the Modesto Rotary Club, the American Legion, to go off to Stanford, go off to Harvard Business School. Spent my career working in business. Now I teach at Modesto Junior College. Teach how to start a company, how to build a business plan. This area means a lot of taco trucks, auto body repair shops. Marijuana dispensaries, which are really popular among my students. The way that I think about my story, the way I sum it all up, is this district really invested a lot in it. This community invested a lot in it. And I'm running for Congress because I want to invest back in that same community, because I think most kids don't have access to the same opportunities that I did growing up around here, right? We've got an unemployment rate twice the national average. 80% of the kids in our school district, which many of you taught, are on free or reduced lunch. We have some real challenges. And I think that our political leadership on the issues that matter most, on healthcare, on immigration, on jobs, and economic opportunity, we are moving backwards instead of forwards. And that's what I want to fix. Healthcare is just the easiest one to think about, right? I mean, you guys have probably seen my TV ad or the mailers that we're sending out. It's a good summary of the issues that I think really matter, right? 50% of this district is on Medicaid. 50%. And yet we have a congressman who voted to repeal the Affordable Care Act a year ago this month, right? My younger brother, 10 weeks premature, 2 years of his life, in and out of a hospital, out of doctors, came out with a health care bill, 104 pages long, right? Think about that. We all have somebody in our life that has a health care story like that. And when I saw he would be without insurance until he's 65 and on Medicare, I decided I had to get on in and see what I could do to fix things. Because that's a very personal issue, and I felt like it was outrageous that we had a representative who was not helping things whatsoever. But healthcare is not the only issue for us, right? Immigration is big. We are a district where immigrants are the economic and social fabric of our community. I think of one of the volunteers in our campaign who works 2 part-time jobs, is a student at MJC, came to the U.S. when she was 3 months old. 3 months old. This young woman is living the American dream. She's working hard, she's getting ahead. We are investing an enormous amount in her success, and yet her DACA protection from deportation expired in October. Any day of the week, she could get that knock telling her she's no longer welcome in our community. And those are the stakes in an election like this one, especially in a district like ours, a community like ours, where we have tens of thousands of these kids, these dreamers, who are not being allowed to succeed. Despite Denham's rhetoric, there have been 2 votes on a DREAM Act in the last 6 months, and he's voted no on both of them. But I don't think we win elections just by those contrasts. I think we got to present a positive vision. How do we move forward? How do we fix some of the core issues here in the Central Valley? I think a lot about the Tri-Valley Growers Peach Cannery. You've heard me talk about it. When I was growing up here, 50% of all the canned peaches in the entire country. Anybody in America, they had a Syrupy canned peach, chances are it came from Modesto, right here. 10,000 jobs 20 years ago. 10,000 great middle-class union jobs. Today it has 2,000 jobs. 80% of those jobs have been automated or outsourced in the last couple decades. And they announced 6 months ago, or 6 weeks ago, they're closing the go. We are going to be losing the last remaining vestiges of that opportunity. And that's a problem that exists all over the rest of the country, right? Ohio, West Virginia, the forces of automation and globalization aren't happening, whether we like it or not. The real question is, what can we do about it? I think we have 2 broad answers. There's the Denham answer, which is blame immigrants, start trade wars with China, hope that trickle-down economics might finally work. I don't think that was the tax cut that you passed. That's not the right set of ingredients. That's not going to fix our issues. Instead, we got to invest in education. We have to invest in infrastructure. We have to fix the 57 failing roads, or 57 failing bridges that American Corps of Civil Engineers in Stanislaus County alone have said are not succeeding. And we got to make sure that we have an education system that actually succeeds, right? There's a high school, Patterson High, right? Go to Patterson High, you'll see 100 kids at risk of dropping out every year. You'll see a program that teaches those kids how to build solar panels, how to drive a forklift, how to operate a robot in a manufacturing environment. They graduate, they get a job, $20 an hour the day after graduation. It's a huge success story. Part of that program is federally funded, and it's getting zeroed out in the same Trump budget that just made room for more tax cuts. I think that's frankly wrong, and that we need to make sure that we're actually investing in the community and planning for our long-term success. Those are the issues of the campaign. Healthcare, immigration, jobs. That's what we're fighting for. We have an election that is 4 weeks from today. 4 weeks, 28 days. Not a lot of time. We got to make sure we get that message out there. I believe, more than anything, that when people hear the facts, when people hear how Jeff Denham has actually voted, they're totally with us. The challenge that we have is making sure that people hear those facts. That we get past all the noise around politics, all the cable news junkies, the fact that a lot of folks don't necessarily want to engage. We got to make sure we pierce that noise. But when we do, folks are with us. We've got 750 people volunteering on the campaign. We're running a real grassroots effort. The polls suggest we're neck and neck with Denham. If there was an election held today, which is a really good place to be. But we got some more work to do, and we need the help of folks in this room, in this backyard. When I think about what's happened all across the country, I see the Democratic momentum and enthusiasm taking place all over America, right? I see Paul Ryan retiring because of people in backyards just like this getting involved in politics for the first time, or the second, or the third, or 20th time. That's really exciting. We've had some big wins, right? We've won special elections in Pennsylvania. We won a Senate seat in Alabama. Who expected a Democrat to win in Alabama? That happened because of committed people getting involved in local politics. So if I have one ask for you, it's please, if you are interested, get involved with our campaign. Help us out. Help us knock on doors. Tell all your friends the issues of this campaign. We've got 4 weeks to go and a lot of information to get out there. And once we do, I think we're going to be in a really good spot. So that's kind of my main platform, my main pitch. That's me. And I'd love to just open it up to a discussion of what we got to do. Concerns people have, questions for me, questions about the campaign, and really anything. And I'd just love to listen to what you guys think about. Thank you for having me. Who wants to start? Don't be shy. Yes, sir.
When we had the debate at the Gallo, it seemed like everybody had the same position on everything.
700,000 doors. The fact is I can't do it alone. I don't think Jeff Denham's ever knocked on the door in his life. That's not, I can't do it alone. I can only do it by building a grassroots effort of support. And I think if you looked at the campaign we built, that's what we've been able to accomplish. And you've seen the results of that happen right now. So don't take me at my word. Look at what we're doing.
I guess I'm concerned the formula being used here is the same, might be some of the same one that was used in that ill-fated race.
Don't worry about that. Yeah, the formula using here, I think, is pretty much as bread and butter as it came. We have a member of Congress who has voted deeply against the interest of his constituents, and frankly, I think that was the same case in my condo, right? I mean, I don't want to take too many positions in that race. I think you had somebody who had become a little. The idea there was he'd become a little too Washington. Maybe you needed somebody that represented the district. That's actually the exact same thing that's happened here, right? Regardless of party lines, Jeff Denham has become too Washington, right? He spends all his time there. He hasn't had a public appearance in this district for over a year, right? Because the last public appearance he had, 1,000 people. Anybody in this audience show up? Yeah. You were the reason he hasn't had a public appearance in the last year. Because you guys showed up, you gave him your mind, he was afraid, and at that town hall he said he was going to vote no against the bill, and then he voted yes 2 weeks later, and that's why he hasn't had a public appearance. So that's the case, right? I mean, you have somebody who isn't even showing up for work, representing his constituents because he's too scared. That's what we want to be doing differently, right? This is like the 5th town hall we've done just in the last 5 days. That's because we got to make sure that we get that message out there. Yes,
not my concern. I'm pragmatic, but I've heard from our urgent Sherlock concerns that your funding, a lot of your funding comes from outside of the area. How would you address that?
Yeah.
Concerns you say if I were that person?
I say a couple of things. First of all, campaign finance is unbelievably important. I think Citizens United and the unbridled effect of money in our politics is one of the worst things that can happen. I think one example of what happens because of that is the tax cut bill that happened in October. Right? 20% of people in our district thought that was a good bill, and yet our representative and many other representatives voted for it. Right? Why? Well, I think it's because 70% of the money from Jeff Denham's campaign coffers come from corporate PACs and special interests. Right? And that's why, when in Congress, I want to make sure that we pass a constitutional amendment to repeal Citizens United and get it all the way out. That's what we got to do. In the meantime, I can build a campaign that I think is as good as it can be. We have not taken a single dollar of corporate PAC money, and we won't. Right? Every dollar we have comes from individuals. Right? It comes from actual grassroots folks. It comes from folks here. It comes from folks all over. Because the fact is, this is one of the best opportunities in the country to flip a seat. We see the misrepresentation.
So does everybody else. Only 2% of Jeff Denham's money comes from the district, right? Which is just a crazy stat if you think about it, right? That's our representative, and 2% of his money comes from the district. We got to make sure we build a village. We do a lot of $5 house parties. If you guys are encouraged and interested in the campaign, I would encourage you to grab one of our remit envelopes and help us out. Because honestly, that's the way that we build a strong campaign, to make sure we actually are funded from the grassroots and make sure we get that message all the way there. Yes, you hand up?
You're new to me because I only knew about 2 people, admin and the Senate.
Can you stand to could you people that have questions, if you could stand, we get the volume.
That's easier.
Okay.
Anyway, you're new to me because I'd only been familiar with Edmund for so long, and then I went to a progressive jet thing. I wanted to saw her name now. She's Hispanic, and yeah, and I'm surprised with both of them. And so, look at a week later, your mayor came. I thought, well, who's he? I thought I didn't know anybody else was in the race, and then you stopped by and talked. So, I have heard a whole lot of all of your issues and what you're standing for and all that, and I don't know what your issues on gun control and what kind of laws you might pass on that. So could you tell me a little bit about that?
Great. That was a really long intro.
I know.
Yeah. No, that's fair. So the question was, first of all, thank you for coming, because this is how you find out more. Her question was, I haven't heard a whole lot about you, wanted to hear more about issues, specifically about gun control, which I know is a really potent issue here. And I know there's even students who've mentioned that this is their number one issue. Here's what I think about this. Thoughts and prayers, no longer enough. We are all disgusted by waking up in the morning, seeing the latest headline, and worrying that it could be another terrible atrocity or tragedy, right? We are disgusted by it. And we have a member of Congress in this district who not only has taken $60,000 from the NRA, and we've seen it in his votes, right? Not only is he voting to keep our gun laws the way they are, he's actually voting to pull them back. So he's voting for something called concealed carry reciprocity, which he co-sponsored. What does that mean? It basically gives us in California the gun laws of Nevada, the state right next door, which has, newsflash, not very strict gun laws. It's not a great thing. It actually undermines our safety, and that's why a lot of police officers here in our community don't support it, because they think it's a terrible idea. What do I want to do? I want to look at what's already been successful all across the country, right? And especially here in California. We have an AR-15 assault rifle ban already in place. You can't buy an AR-15 in California. We have 10-day waiting periods, which are important because the silent epidemic of gun tragedies is gun suicides. It's the 20,000 people a year that die in gun suicides that we don't see as many headlines about, but it actually takes more lives. 10-day waiting periods do a lot to make sure they cut down that. And we have universal background checks. All three of those things, AR-15 ban, assault rifle ban, universal background checks, 10-day waiting periods, already exist here in California. And guess what? They work. We've cut gun deaths down in California over the last 25 years by over 60%. Fantastic. What I want to do is take that set of things and make sure that exists all around the rest of the country, right? So in Nevada, in Parkland, Florida, you are not allowed to buy a weapon of war. You should be subject to universal background checks. Even most gun owners in our community believe that. You should make sure that you have these waiting periods. That's what I want. I want to make sure that we take that and we make it the law of the land across the entire country, because it's already saved countless lives here in California. That's the gun show. So in California, even if you go to a gun show, you are still subject to a background check. That's not the case in the rest of the country, and that's what we got to fix.
So if you go to the rest someplace else, can you bring it back here?
You can. Yes, and that's one of the reasons our safety is undermined, especially kind of the closer you get to the Nevada border. Our safety is undermined by what happens there. So there are assault rifles in California. That's because people drive a couple hours, they buy them in Nevada, and then they come back over the border. So the only way that we can actually be truly safe in our community is to make sure that the assault rifle ban that is already successful here is extended to the rest of the country. Right. And it was, and then it got repealed. Yeah, I felt it. Yes, sir.
I was curious about tax reform. I believe the average family in this district should be receiving an extra $2,000 a year. If you were elected to office, would you plan on repealing that tax bill?
Yeah, I mean, 30% of people in this district that took the state and local tax deduction, right? And so actually, a
lot of folks in this district are seeing a tax increase, right? I talked to a lot of people who saw on their tax bill either a couple dollars that wasn't actually going to help them, all that much, we got kind of the crumbs instead of the cake, or actual taxes going up. When I think of that tax bill, I look at the fact that we added $1.5 trillion. This happened just 6-7 months ago, right? Last October. We added $1.5 trillion to the national debt. What did we get for it? We got a handful of large corporations, Wells Fargo, Bank of America. They did real well. They sent out a lot of money back in stock buybacks, and they helped a handful of their investors. Wages didn't go up that much. Not a lot of people who actually benefited. My challenge is, what if we took that money? What if we took that $1.5 trillion, and instead of adding it to the national debt, we actually invested it in the needs of our community, in the education, in the infrastructure, right? The apprenticeship programs that we know are necessary. The fact that we have, way too many folks that are commuting with terrible commutes because we have failing roads and bridges that aren't getting the investment that they need. That's my plan, and I think that's what we need to be focusing on. Yes, sir.
Now, we live in a district with a high poverty rate, a large amount of homeless, and a housing crisis. From a Washington standpoint, how would you intervene there? And I'd like to hear your thoughts and then my thoughts on that.
I would say a couple things. One is, what can we do to promote more jobs here in the Valley, right? So I've said this before. What I want to do is make sure that we're taxing jobs less and areas with high unemployment. If you're an employer deciding whether or not to put a new $75,000 a year job in Modesto with 10% unemployment, that job should be taxed less in payroll taxes than if that same job is in Mountain View or San Francisco where there's 1% unemployment. We need to make sure that the jobs are coming to the areas where they're actually needed. Second, we need to make sure that we're actually investing in that type of education programs, right? There's high schools in California where there's 35 computer science classes. Then there's places like Modesto High where there's barely any, right? We're not getting the same amount of education all across California, and we can fix that if we actually put our budget priorities where our verbal priorities are, and making sure that we're investing where we need to be. Poverty is, part of jobs, but it's not only, right? We have 180,000 people in this district who are receiving CalFresh or SNAP. They're receiving food stamps. 2 weeks ago, Jeff Denham voted to cut spending on food stamps, right? So what we need to do is also make sure that the members of our community are getting the resources they need. Part of that is making sure that our food stamp budget stays where it is and maybe even goes up. And second, make sure that healthcare is universally accepted, right? I mean, the biggest need for somebody in poverty is making sure that they can go to the doctor and get the care that they need. And voting to repeal the Affordable Care Act, voting to put 100,000 people more on insurance, repealing the individual mandate, which actually went all the way through and is going to leave premiums prices skyrocketing in this community and a lot of others. That is the biggest challenge to anybody's livelihood, no matter where you live on the poverty spectrum. And that's why I think healthcare is such an important priority, and that's why I support Medicare for all. I think we should be investing in the parts of our healthcare system that already have the lowest cost, the highest patient satisfaction. It's cheaper to cover a 65-year-old than to cover a 64-year-old. We should be putting more people in the parts of our healthcare system that are already successful and having better outcomes and lower costs. Yes, sir.
I really have a question in regards to, okay, let's say you get elected, you're the freshman congressman from, this district, and we have, the Amazon Fulfillment Center there, the average salary for Amazon is $28,000 a year, while the CEO, Jeff Bezos, makes $28,000 a minute. And you get the fantasy to choose what committee you're going to be on in Congress. And let's say other Amazons are enticed, that type of high-tech industry is coming in and chewing up and spitting out the serfs, so to speak. What do you do about that?
So there's a lot to that question. My priorities, I think, are fairly clear, which are healthcare, immigration, and jobs. Where I think I have a competitive advantage, given my business background, where I actually spent working on companies, helping them grow from small businesses to big businesses, what I've done now teaching at Modesto Junior College, is, I think, mostly focused on how do we create more jobs and entrepreneurial opportunities here in the Valley. And I think that's why, whatever committee I'm on, Energy and Commerce is one that I think I would probably have a lot to offer, given my background. is something that I think, because look, when I step back and I think of what is the problem, not just in our district, but all across America, I think we have a handful of areas that have really successfully, have done really successfully economically over the last 50 years, right? Bay Area, Chicago, Boston, they're doing great, right? Wages are skyrocketing. They don't have a lot of housing, but their wages are doing well.
Got a lot of social problems.
A lot of social problems. But there's the rest of the country. Areas like ours, where we have a stagnant median wage, where we have fewer jobs in rural America today than we had before the 2008 financial crisis. That, to me, is the biggest problem that we have in our entire country, right? Is how do we fix these core issues, right? We're not going to get the peach cannery jobs. We're not going to get the coal jobs to come back. I don't think that's the right ingredient.
Right.
But I do think that we can invest in what we know is coming down the pipe. We can actually try to get ahead of things. And that's what I want my priority to be. And I think, by the way, that should be a bipartisan set of priorities. That is not a Republican or a Democrat issue. Both Republicans and Democrats go to schools. They want their kids to be well educated. They want to make sure that rural high schools have access to the same types of advanced STEM and computer science programs that are existing in wealthier districts, right? And that's why it should be bipartisan. And that's why that would probably be where I would actually be spending my time, is making sure that communities like ours are getting the right amount of investment in the future. More, I can be here all day, yes sir.
Ted Howes on his.
You're really a Ted Howes, Ted focused. I love it.
Hey.
Love it.
And one of the things that he has posted on his Facebook page on his House of Congress is on the issue of immigration.
Yeah.
Where he explicitly states that he wants to see federal funds withheld from those who are non-citizens of the United States. I say non-citizens, that includes legal immigrants as well.
Green card holders, permanent residents.
I don't know that I've seen any of your opponents in the Democratic field make an issue of this. I think this is an issue that you're strong in, number one.
Yeah.
But I think that could help separate you from maybe the pack if you take on someone like this and say, this is what's happening here.
I hear you. I don't think it's a bad idea. Look, Ted Howes doesn't have a ton of support. And honestly, I want to make sure that we're running a positive campaign on what we can actually do, right? What are the changes that we can actually make happen, right? And also highlight what's already not happening in our community, right? You're right. There are a million things we can talk about immigration that are going wrong, right? We can talk about temporary protected status, where Trump is trying to send thousands of refugees who came to this country from Haiti, Honduras, and El Salvador back to their own countries where maybe they haven't been for 2 decades. There's a lot of issues going on immigration, right? We got to pick our battles, and I think campaigns work best when there's a really solid, clear, concise message. The concise message for this campaign is Jeff Denham is not working for us. He's working for his donors and he's working for his party. That's the message, and we see that on every vote he takes. We see that on immigration. We see that on healthcare. That's the message. And I don't think and also the positive vision that we're bringing, right? How do we get more of those jobs? How do we actually make sure that we're preparing our community for what we know is going to happen over the next 50, 100 years, right? That's the plan. I gotta be somewhat focused, because if it's like whack-a-mole trying to say everything to every Donald Trump tweet or Ted Howes Facebook post, I'm not gonna have any time to do anything else, and we gotta make sure we
people
focus.
like us to remind you.
I hear you.
We want to see you campaign into the summer.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
But
Yeah.
I would just add that I would argue, I don't think very many people know about Ted Howes either. So I think if you engage with him, you bring attention to him. I don't know, that's just my thought. I think you and I know about him, but for average person.
Could very well be on the ballot.
I know.
I think there are some Republicans that
Well,
want
yeah,
to
that's
see
right.
Republicans
For the
be
primary.
governors. They don't like Denham, and they're going to want a Republican. And so that's what I think it is.
That's the strategy. He's a Denham ally.
I hear you. Ultimately, we got to focus on getting our message across. I don't wake up every morning thinking about the folks that are paying a lot of attention. We already got those folks in our campaign. Those people are volunteering for our campaign. They're knocking on our door. I worry every day about those people who, they commute to the Bay Area every day. They wake up at 4 in the morning. They commute a couple hours. They come back at 10 o'clock. They don't have time to really focus on what the issues of their constituents. They're going to go to that ballot box. They're probably going to vote. Probably going to vote for a name they recognize. That's why we got to make sure we get that thing across, because that, like I said, the facts are actually in our favor. We got to make sure that people hear them. We have a couple more questions, and then we'll break up. I want to make sure people have a chance to get the food. I'll be around forever, but I want to make sure people don't go to sleep in the wonderful, beautiful afternoon sun. Yes, sir.
Okay. A couple days ago, there was an article in the paper about consolidated fire, and although that is entirely be your issue, and it's an issue that could go national, they were saying that they wanted to start charging for emergency service calls, which I consider an extremely scary idea. If they're picking up that here, then the other fire departments can pick it up, and the police can pick it up, the other people can pick it up, and all of a sudden we're just paying for emergency services 2 or 3 or 4 times.
It's a great question. That doesn't fall under the federal government, right? That's a state and local issue. But the reason why it matters is because that shows the implications of one version of what our government and our community should look like. A community based only on more and more tax cuts, right? A community based on a very far-right vision of what should be successful, where only folks that can pay for emergency services actually get them, right? Frankly, it's kind of like the healthcare system we already have today, we're already living with, right? What I want to make sure, look, I mean, I don't want to make sure that people are paying crazy amounts of taxes, but I do want to make sure that we create social services that everybody benefits from. And I want to make sure that we have an economy that is actually invested in, instead of an economy that is ignored, right? We don't do any benefit giving $1.5 trillion to large corporations just to give back to their shareholders, as opposed to taking that money and actually investing it in the type of state and local services that create safety and security, like the fire services, the education in our schools that actually make sure that we creating a more vibrant economy that's making more jobs for folks. That's my vision of the economy, right? So this particular issue, the way that we combat that is we make sure that we have a functioning state, local, and federal government that doesn't believe in just more and more trickle-down economics at the expense of core social services, be that cutting SNAP benefits, be that cutting Medi-Cal services where 100,000 folks would have lost insurance, be that cutting the fire department, right? We got to make sure that we present a different vision, and we win with that vision all the way at the ballot box. All right, we have one last question, and then go and convene and come up and be shy. Yeah.
Going back to the topic of gun control, I was just wondering if you will support a ban on all semi-automatic weapons.
Absolutely, yeah. So that's a ban that already exists in California. It's a great ban, and it's saved so many lives, right? So the question was, what are we going to do about an assault rifles ban? We already have that in California. We need to make sure that that's nationwide, right? I mean, I meet with our veterans, and they tell me, look, I see the same weapon on our streets that I served with in Iraq and Afghanistan. That doesn't make any sense, right? We need to make sure that weapons of war are not actually allowed, because we've seen the implications of what those atrocities have happened over and over and over and over and over again. In California, you can't buy those, but you can take them from across the border. You can take them from Nevada. You can go down to Arizona, New Mexico. You can take them up here. That's not right. The only way that we're actually safe, the only way that we actually make sure we have a universal assault rifles ban is if we win. A lot of folks, we had a great March for Our Lives protest. Anybody participate in the March for Our Lives protest? That's exciting. In Turlock, it was the largest political protest in history. In city history. Think about that. The largest political, not like there was 1 million people there. That was a big deal, right? The largest political protest in Turlock City history. So I think we have a chance. The bad news is somebody like Jeff Denham, he's not going to change his mind on this issue. There is no amount of political pressure, I believe, that we're going to be able, no amount of calls to Jeff Denham's office to convince him to change his mind on this issue, or frankly on many others. I think he's proven that he doesn't really care about how we call it. The way that we make change, my vision of change, is we win in elections. If we win in elections, if we change the House, if we make sure that members of Congress are coming in that actually reflect our new our values on gun control, on climate change, on anything else, then we'll make sure that we're in a really different place. To do that, we need your help. So thank you guys so much for being here. One more round of applause for Vicki and our wonderful host, making sure that we're there. Yeah, absolutely, yeah. I will be around. Please, if you're too shy to ask a question,